Hello, this is Margaret from the University of Sewing, and this is going to be a demonstration of how to do a cover stitch hem. We're working on the L890 Bernina sewing machine. It's an air threaded machine, and it does both functions of serging and cover stitch. I currently have it set up for cover stitching. I want to point out before we get started that this machine, while it does both functions, there are machines such as this Bernette machine. It's a B62 airlock, and what that means is that it air threads, so your cover stitch looper actually threads with air. The thread comes out right here, and it's a super simple machine to thread. All you have to do is decide how many needles you want to use. In this case, we've got it set up for a wide stitch cover stitch with 2 threads, and the cover stitch cover looper is on here. So there's only 3 threads, and you can literally thread this in about 3 minutes. Now, with the L890, because it goes back and forth from cover stitching to serging, you have to do a few things with it. So one of the things that we have to do with it is we have to make sure our upper looper function is turned off. That's this button right here. And the reason for that is that upper looper would hit this plate otherwise. We also have to turn off the knife blade. On that machine that I just showed you, the B62, it doesn't have a knife, so you don't have to worry about turning it off. So when we get ready to thread this machine, this dial right here takes and closes my tubes for my air threading. Notice that this one's not connecting to anything. The reason why is we've turned off that upper looper function, and it doesn't need to go to that tube doesn't need to go to the upper looper anymore. So we have this also set up with a 2 thread. There's 2 threads right here. We have our 2 needles. Notice that there's actually screws for 5 needles. There's 3 up here in the front, and then right here, there's 2 more. Those 2 back there are for serger functions, and we will not be using those today. For cover stitch, we can set this up for 2 or 3 needles. We're only going to use 2 today. And I want to give you a couple of tips about what to look for. And now I've just opened up my tubes because we've already got the machine set up for cover stitching. We've got our plate on, we've got our knife blade turned off, we have our tubes open so the machine can work. And we're going to close this up because this machine has a function where if this is open, it will only take 1 stitch, and then it kind of stops and looks at you like, well, you dummy, oh, close your door. So we do that. Now, what I want to show you is what happens with a couple of different kinds of fabric. So this is a polyester knit. It's a very stable knit. It doesn't have a lot of stretch. It has some stretch, but it's a pretty stable knit. It's pretty thick. So it is folded up for the hem, and I have stitched on this a little bit. I'm going to finish stitching. Now watch what's going on here. I am actually lining my fabric up with this opening right here to keep my hem straight. And the reason I'm showing you this is because as we go and we hem this, we aren't getting any puckering. There's nothing looking bad on this. When we get to the end of this line, we're going to lift our foot up. With cover stitching, what you do is you want to use some type of tool. Bernina has this really nice little tool. And what we do is we pull our needle threads out here. We get our scissors, we cut the thread, and we pull it out of the machine towards the back. And there we go. It got a little fuzzy on it. It wasn't happy. So I tried to make this where you guys could see the stitching and what's happening with this. And it's in purple thread. No, normally I wouldn't use purple thread, but purple thread will be fine for you guys to see what we're doing. So what you traditionally do with cover stitch is you fold up your hem, you stitch it And then what you're going to do is you're going to trim your extra fabric down so that this fabric will be cut right above the cover stitching. And that is how you're going to finish this. Now, you see there's some loose threads here. What you can do with your loose threads is you can pull these to the back of the garment. And we're going to pull those back. I have a cream thread. I have a blue thread. That's making it easier for me to see what's going on here. So I've got this little blue thread I'm going to pull to the back. Now what I can do with this to really secure these stitches and to make sure that there isn't going to be a problem is I can take them all as one group of thread. I can make a loop, and then I can hold that down and we will have a little knot right there. We can leave a little bit of thread, and now what you can do is you can feed that thread into there. There is a double-eyed needle. Double-eyed needles are really handy when you're doing sergers or cover stitches. This one, all my threads are pulled to the back, and again, I can take all my threads. I can make a quick little loop. I can use my fingernail to kind of hold that loop so it'll go down. Look at that. All done. And again, I can thread this through my cover stitching and just trim that off. So that makes for a very nice finish, and it is very stretchy. So I can stretch that. It looks great, and I am finished with that hem. Now, what I did was I've made a circle. And think about this like a shirt hem, or think about it like a hem on a sleeve. And what you can do with this is you can go ahead and I purposely left the salvage edge on this fabric because I thought, well, that'll make a great line for me to turn up on, and I can serge my fabric on here. Now, my settings. So Bernina gives you the option when you turn on the machine, you have it sets up the settings for you. But you can look at the settings here right now, and this would be a good starting place for a cover stitch hem. The left needle is set at a tension of 3.8. My right needle is at 5.3, and my cover looper is at 1.5. Those particular settings will work well on your cover stitch machine. You can at least use those as a starting place. But the one thing about this right now is we have a differential feed and we have a stitch length. Now on this machine, I can just touch a button and I can get to those. This is my stitch length. It's at 3.5. It's a little bit longer stitch length, which is what you want for a cover stitch because we don't want our stitches to be real close together. Then we have a differential feed of 1. It turns out when I use this lighter weight knit, this is a rayon knit. The first one was a polyester knit. It was a heavier knit. It was more like a lightweight double knit. This one is a very lightweight knit. So I try to sample sewing it at those settings, and look at this gathering. And I mean, it just looks like a mess, doesn't it? Well, I changed my differential feed and I put it to the smallest number it could go, which is 0.7, and look how nice that looks. So there it is. And then I just wanted to show you a typical hem is going to be in a circle. So what I'm going to do now is, again, I purposely left that salvage edge so I'd have something to fold up on. I'm going to do this hem a little bit shorter than the last one. I did the other one right here because of how much I've turned under. I'm making this a little bit of a shorter hem allowance. So now I'm going to do, oh, by the way, I forgot about this. I have a free arm on this machine. If you don't have a free arm on your machine, you really might want to think about getting one that does. Boy, does that simplify things. Because now what I can do is I can just drape that hem into that little hole I've got right now. I can hold my fabric under here. Oh, and the other thing I did too, with this being a lighter weight knit, I've changed how hard my fabric is being pressed upon, and I put it down on a number 2. Okay, so we're gonna try that and see what it looks like. So we will go ahead. I'm going to start off going over my little hem allowance, or my seam right there. And I'm going to stitch, and it did want to gather up going over that stitch a little bit. Just slow down over those your seam allowances, because I think you'll find that that looks a little bit better if you do. So I'm going along here. Look at that. That looks very nice. And it didn't make a mess right there, so that's what I was a little bit concerned about. So I'm going to let that drape down there. I'm going to go around this whole thing in a circle, and this time I will stitch over top of my first stitches for about 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to pull those needle threads up, cut them, and then that will pull everything to the back when I cut my looper thread. This is so fast and nice that I will tell you, if you work with knits a bunch, having notice I'm cutting my original, we're gonna cut that one, and we're gonna cut that original stitches when we got started there, so that I don't have them make a mess with everything else. This is just gonna look so nice. Okay, I went over top of my original stitches for several stitches. I'm gonna lift up my foot. I'm gonna pull out these threads, cut that. It's gonna pull everything to the back when I pull that thread out. Then I'm gonna cut my looper thread. All those stitches are now to the back. And again, we're just going to make a big loop with those 3 threads. And we're gonna encourage that knot to go down to our original threads there. And after this demonstration, I'll go ahead and show you what a double-eyed needle looks like. But there we go, we're done with that. And we can just thread this thread underneath those stitches with either a big tapestry needle or a needle. And look at this, guys. Doesn't that hem look great? So it's tunneling a tiny little bit, but once I go over and press it, that tunneling will completely go away. Here's that extra fabric that I used to make that guide using my salvage edge. And salvage edges on knits are they are really a wide variety. Sometimes they're hard and you don't want to stitch through them. Sometimes they're nice and soft like this one is, and it doesn't matter. So, but that was enough fabric to put right under there. And imagine that, would that not be a cute little hem? And yes, I'm gonna press it. So it's gonna look a little bit nicer after I press it, but that's a pretty darn good looking hem, and this is what it finishes like. Now over here, I'm gonna bring you what it would look like to do this on a piece of woven fabric. So here it is on woven fabric. Now, if you're gonna do this on woven fabric, I highly recommend that what you're gonna do is serge this edge, then fold it up. But you can do some really pretty decorative things with your cover stitch machine. And boy, there isn't a better way to get perfect double needle stitching than there is with a cover stitch machine. So that is the technique for hemming a cover stitch hem. Now, if you have a fabric that when you turn it up, nothing you do will let it lie nice for you, Remember, you can always get something like this, which is a piece of knit interfacing. Now this one happens to be 2 inches wide, and I would only recommend using 2 inches if your hem allowance is going to be 2 inches. But I have this in both 2 inches and 1 inch. And what you can do is you can iron this right onto this finish. It's going to give you something very solid. Now this will only work if your hem does not need to stretch. I do not recommend using the interfacing if your hem has to stretch. It's just not going to work very nicely, and it's going to be too heavy. But if your hem doesn't have to stretch and you want it very crisp, knit interfacing is a good choice. If you need a line on your fabric, I was lucky enough to have my hem allowance, but you can use something like a friction marker and you can mark your knit. Always check and make sure the friction marker is going to come out, but once you press it, it should just go away. So again, very simple to do a hem on a cover stitch machine, and if you do a lot of work with knits, I highly recommend them. They're very handy. So we will have question and answer here in just a couple of minutes, and this is being recorded for a Zoom meeting. So if you're watching this on YouTube, if you have some questions for me, you're more than welcome to put them in the comments, and I will answer them as I see them. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I hope that you will consider getting a cover stitch machine because I think they're the bomb. Have a great day.